There was a movie I once watched called The Odd Life of Timothy Green. It's actually a pretty sad story, all things considered, but I just couldn't help but think about the Zetsu as I watched this movie. I mean, a boy that appears to be part plant, appearing because his parents bury a box full of dreams. I mean, that was some real creation of all things technique stuff right there. And it reminded me of when Hagoromo created the tailed beasts out of the ten tails. But Hagoromo's utilization of Yin-Yang Release took the imaginary and gave it form. His desire to protect the people by splitting the ten tails into 9 different beasts gave rise to this split, and the creation of the 9 unique personalities simply by willing it so. But anyway, the movie made me think about the ten tails and its ability to generate life, as well as its feral nature and how Kaguya Otsutsuki had fused with it, and it made me wonder, what if Naruto were the ten tails? Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. We've also noticed that a lot of the folks who regularly watch our videos aren't actually subscribed to our channel. We get it. YouTube does a great job of getting the right videos to the right people, but if you want to make sure that you don't miss any videos, and if you want to support the Amagi, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. Hashirama Senju stood there in the rain. His perch atop this mountain gave him a view into the distant horizon. Across from him, in what appeared to be a bowl of land surrounded by mountains, a large silhouette loomed. It was large, its true appearance hidden in the overcast night. Only short glimpses were caught of it when the flash of lightning crossed above. Sometimes the lightning would strike it, to which it offered no reaction. It was a monster. Looking upon it brought Hashirama to terror, his body shaking. "Hashirama!" a voice cried out from below. Madara looked up at him, his eyes bearing rings reaching from the center and moving outward, the sclera a purplish hue. He smiled in cruel expectation at the man who had once been his equal and opposite, but no longer. Madara was now a god, and Hashirama was nothing more than a simple man. "Come down here, Hashirama, or has it finally hit you that you can't beat me?" he asked, his voice mocking, each word a separate insult to Hashirama's pride. Hashirama slid down the mountain and came to meet Madara. He was silent as he looked into the pale purple eyes of the man he once considered his brother. Madara looked back behind him. "The legends uttered in silence, orally kept from generation to generation, spoke of the sage's greatest weapon, his source of power, life itself. I thought it to be a myth. Little did I know. I decided to venture about in my exile. During this time, I wandered to the northeast of the Land of Fire and found our ancestral home, the Land of Ancestors, or what was left of it, ravaged, ruined, lifeless. The only thing standing among these sun-baked dunes was a single temple with a powerful seal. Within, I found the beast with the power to give life and take it away. The Ten Tails. Ancient warnings were scrawled across the walls, speaking of the sage and its power. In forming a pact with it, our power was shared, and within me awakened the power of the Sage of Six Paths, the very man we venerate and teach our children of. I and he are now one. I am the god of destruction, and I've come to judge Konoha for its sins." Hashirama growled as a scowl covered his face. "And what sins have we committed, Madara? What sins have we committed?" Madara looked down upon him. "The sin of dishonesty. We're shinobi, Madara. Dishonesty is our greatest tool." Madara shook his head. "No, dishonesty towards yourselves. Your surety that our village will bring an everlasting peace. Failure to take precautions to stop the coming wars. You fooled yourselves, and because of your foolishness, judgment has come." Hashirama refused this, and so their fight began. This is way tougher of a battle here because Madara now not only possesses the Ten Tails, but he also possesses the Rinnegan that comes with it. Now, I'm no expert at scaling, but I would have to say that I highly doubt Hashirama can do this alone. If Madara in the original canon timeline was considered easy mode, then what Hashirama is facing now is practically Dante must die mode. So, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna throw Tobirama into this battle as well, because I don't think it's feasible for Hashirama to beat this by himself. I'm even slightly wondering if he can truly beat this threat, even with Tobirama, but you know, if worse comes to worse, a little plot armor never hurt nobody. Hashirama, kneeling on the ground, holding himself up by leaning upon his katana, felt hopeless. But that was when a flash of light appeared by him. Tobirama rose to his full height as he stood beside his brother. Hashirama looked at him, still trying to catch his breath. "Tobirama, I told you to stay away." His stoic brother looked down upon him with an equally stoic expression. "And now I'm glad I didn't." He helped Hashirama to stand, and from here they continued to battle against Madara and the Ten Tails. Despite everything Madara had, Tobirama was faster, and Hashirama had ways of countering all of his attacks. This battle continued on without rest for days, and with the continual aid of Tobirama, they managed to wear Madara down, and Hashirama managed to kill him. But the battle was not yet over. There was the Ten Tails to deal with. Its grasp on Wood Release was raw and untamed, but still present. Hashirama, utilizing his Sage Art Wood Release, true several thousand hands, managed to push it back a ways away from the village, the battle carving out a new valley into the landscape. As he continued to press the beast back, he began to utilize a new technique. "Hokage style, 60-year-old technique," he shouted as he weaved hand signs with the speed to impress even Tobirama. "Entering society with bliss-bringing hands." He pressed his wood golem's hand to the head of the Ten Tails, but it wasn't quite enough. Hashirama needed more. He jumped to the beast and pressed his hand to its forehead. It retaliated by attempting to stab through his hand with wooden spikes. However, Hashirama just clenched his teeth and bore the pain, realizing he could not stop. The blood of the first Hokage, as well as his chakra, seeped into the beast itself. He forced the technique as hard as he could, and slowly it began to show signs of working. Eventually, the beast almost seemed to wilt. It continued to grow weaker and weaker, and slowly it became a lifeless husk, wasting away in the night air. Tobirama stood above Madara's body and looked down upon it. If what he said was true, then he in actuality became a god, the next sage of 6 paths. I need to study him. I need to understand where he derived this power, and better yet, figure out how we can apply this to ourselves. Hashirama stood over Madara's body. He was victorious and had defeated the man who presented the greatest challenge to him in his life. He should be proud, but he wasn't. He was sad. "Are you okay, Hashirama?" his brother asked, noticing the look on his face. Hashirama nodded. "Yeah, it's just, Madara truly was my friend." "Are you so sure?" Tobirama asked. "It took him so long just to accept you, and he easily threw you away. And worse, tried to bring down everything you loved. No friend does that." Hashirama thought about it. Maybe things would have changed had he been Hokage instead. Maybe his views would have been different. Or maybe he was right all along. Tobirama put his hands on Hashirama's shoulders. "No, he was gaslighting you, making you doubt yourself. Your gut instincts more often than not are correct. People like him make you question that, make you question yourself. Things you know are wrong, they insist that you're wrong for not accepting. They try to make you believe you're insane and that you would agree with them if you were in the right mind. That's a form of abuse, Hashirama. He abused you as his friend, and no true friend ever intentionally gaslights their friend like that. You did nothing wrong." Hashirama nodded and looked down at the body again, but still, it's hard. He was my best friend for years, and he just betrayed me like that. What did I ever do to deserve his hatred? Tobirama shook his head. "You didn't do a thing. This has nothing to do with you, Hashirama. He was a sociopath, a manipulator. Your friendship was real to you, but not to him. Don't blame yourself." Hashirama smiled. "You always know what to say to help me. If I didn't already know better, I would have assumed you to be the older brother. You're so much wiser and more responsible than I." Tobirama shook his head. "No, we just have different strengths. You lead with your heart, I lead with my mind. We have our own strengths and weaknesses, but that doesn't mean that I'm in any way better. Trust me, when Konoha needs someone to comfort them in a time of need, they'll turn to you, not me." Hashirama hugged his brother. "I'm still going to miss Madara." Tobirama pat his brother's back. "Because that's your nature, brother. You're too pure for this world." Hashirama couldn't bear to see Madara's body anymore, so he turned away from it and walked towards the Ten Tails husk. He was a little confused. He had not intended to kill the beast. He merely wanted to suppress its chakra enough to put it to sleep. Honestly, his technique was not one designed to kill. It was one designed to pacify. So how did it do this to the beast? Particularly a beast with such a vast well of power such as the Ten Tails. Something just didn't add up. He slid down into the crater where the beast was and began to step around it. He placed his hand on the wood and it felt just as lifeless as it looked, like decaying sandpaper. It gave off a unique smell, not too different from a freshly cut pine tree. His hand was no longer bleeding and the wounds had already nearly healed up. "What were you?" he asked the tree, as if expecting some answer. He heard a sound, a rustling of wood and mud. He pulled his blade. "Who's there?" he asked. He began to step a little closer toward where he heard the sound and saw a shadow move. Someone was here. He followed the shadow to a location, a cleft in the beast's wooden flesh. He heard something from inside of it. He reached out and gripped the wood and pulled it away and pointed his blade at the first thing he saw. To his surprise, he saw a small child, dirty, shivering, and the look of terror present in its eyes. Hashirama lowered his blade as Tobirama came to see what was going on, his blade present in his hands. "What is that thing?" he asked. Hashirama looked at it. "It gives off the same massive chakra signature as the Ten-Tails. I was wondering why the Ten-Tails would die by me simply trying to pacify it. It's because it didn't die, it became this." Tobirama readied his kunai. "If it became this thing, then it's vulnerable. Let's kill it." Hashirama put his hand out to stop his brother. "No, put the blade away." Hashirama returned his own blade to its saya and knelt down to offer a hand. Tobirama looked at him. "Are you crazy?" Hashirama looked up. "You just got through telling me that I should follow my gut and keep being me." Tobirama shook his head. "I said that to keep you from being manipulated by the enemy, not to take a world-shattering weapon of mass destruction and turn it into your best friend." Hashirama edged closer, but the child recoiled, its breathing intensifying. "Poor thing, it's terrified." Tobirama scoffed. "For easily the strongest creature in the world, it's awfully fearful." Hashirama retracted his hand and put on the kindest face he could. "Hello, don't be scared, I don't want to hurt you." He formed a flower from the ground with his wood release and picked it, offering it to the small child. It appeared to be no older than 4. In actuality, it was likely far older by way of the Ten-Tails, but it currently held the form of what its mental state currently was, and Hashirama couldn't bring himself to ignore it. The child took the flower from him and looked at it for a moment before eating it. Both Hashirama and Tobirama were surprised to see this reaction, but to each their own, I suppose. Hashirama came a bit closer and extended his hand to the child. Once more, it recoiled in fear, but Hashirama didn't stop. He stroked its cheek with his hand. The child turned to look toward him. The way he stroked its cheek showed all the loving kindness that a father should have, and that's exactly what he was. Hashirama was no stranger to fatherhood. He had already raised up one child and seen them off. They had even presented him with a grandchild of his own, Tsunade, and he was spoiling her rotten. So he was pretty good with children, and this same affection was coming in clutch right now as the Ten-Tails' toddler-like incarnation seemed to be soothed by this act. It crawled over to him and embraced him, cowering in his chest like any scared child would. He lifted the beast up into his arms and took the cloak he had brought with him and covered the child with it. "You can't be serious. You mean to bring that thing back to Konoha with you? You'll finish what Madara started." Hashirama looked at his brother. "I can't leave it alone to fend for itself. And besides, if we can befriend it, we may never need to fight in a war again. This child could be the key to world peace. I refuse to simply ignore that." To that, Tobirama relented. They made their way back to Konoha, where Hashirama and Tobirama would split off. Hashirama was planning to take it to its home, where he and his wife Mito would look after it. He knocked on the door, opened it, and called out for his wife. Mito came downstairs to see it. "What are you doing with that child?" she asked. Hashirama began to explain it to her. He let the child back down to the ground. It stood there and took his hand, hiding something from Mito. The Uzumaki woman's heart immediately melted upon seeing this and took it as a personal challenge to befriend the tot. She knelt down. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." Her hand reached out and wiped away a single tear that was running down its cheek. This act of motherly affection awakened within the toddler an interest to understand her. The child let go of Hashirama's hand and walked to her. Its skin was pale, like tofu, and its skin sort of felt like tofu too. "It's a boy, yes?" she asked. Hashirama nodded. She looked to the boy. "Has he given you his name yet?" Hashirama shook his head. "I don't think he has one." Mito smiled. "We'll have to change that now, won't we?" Hashirama smiled too. "I actually had the perfect name for him. I wanted to name him Kiko, spelled with the characters for wood and child. Makes sense, right?" Mito looked at the child and noticed that upon its stomach it had a red swirling pattern. "Nope, I think he looks like a Naruto." Hashirama's brow furrowed in confusion. "See the little red swirl on his tummy? His pale color in this red swirl makes him look almost exactly like a fish cake, so his name should be Naruto." Hashirama raised a finger to protest, but the moment Mito cut her eyes to him, he lowered it, deciding to accept the somewhat silly name. She smiled at her defeated husband. "Naruto it is then." Mito lifted the child up to dote upon it further, something she hadn't been able to do since her own son had left home some years before. She would clean the child, feed the child, and carry it around on her hip. Naruto seemed to be enjoying himself, but he still hadn't spoken yet. I wonder if he's still nervous, Hashirama asked. He came to the child and playfully poked it in the ribs to make it giggle. Ticklish. He continued to tickle the child until it laughed so hard its face took on a reddish color. Hashirama stopped. Can you talk? He asked it. Naruto just looked at him in confusion as Mito sat down with the child on her lap. It didn't respond to him. Can you say anything? It continued to look at him. Mito then spoke. Can you say Hashirama? She asked. The child sat there for a moment. Hashira, he smiled. Almost there? Naruto continued to try. Suddenly, he shouted it. Hashirama! This took Hashirama by surprise because the way he said it sounded so much like Madara. The child almost seemed worked up when it screamed that name. It buried its head into Mito's bosom, apparently suddenly startled by itself. She looked up at her husband. Didn't you say that it used to be the Ten Tails? Hashirama nodded. Mito looked closer at the child. Perhaps it remembers its time as the Ten Tails. Hashirama thought about it. I certainly hope not. I didn't go easy on it. She began to comfort the boy. Little fella's shaking. Hashirama gave a bit of a laugh. Yeah, me too. He was so strong I barely escaped with my life. Mito smiled at her husband and then handed the boy over to him to hold for himself. Hashirama held it close to him. By now, his armor was off and he was merely wearing his house kimono. The child seemed to let go of the tension in its body as it heard the beating of Hashirama's heart. It seemed that Hashirama was going to be a father again. He looked down at it with a smile. We're going to need to get him better clothes. I don't think Tajirama's clothes are going to work for him. He's too small for them. Mito agreed. And so, as time passed, Naruto continued to live with Hashirama and Mito. They attempted to educate him. They tried to teach him how to speak English or Japanese or whatever language they speak in the Naruto world, and slowly he would begin to pick it up. His rate of learning was fairly impressive. They hardly had to teach him anything when it came to reading. He merely looked at the paper and read it out loud as if it were the easiest thing in the world. How or why he could do this was unknown to them, but he quickly picked it up. That wasn't to say he talked all that much. He was generally quiet, but he did at least understand what they were saying. So that was a plus. They would tell him stories. Hashirama always hated history lessons, but learned early on if you told history like a story, it would be accepted by children who thought of it as something fun. He tiptoed around certain historical events, such as the Warring States period and the era of the Sage of Six Paths. After all, this boy was technically alive during the Sage's time, and he likely experienced traumatic events that he didn't wish to remember, so they avoided the subject altogether. However, he did teach him about the Warring States period, just avoiding any graphic descriptions of death. Naruto's fire to learn was nothing short of genius and was characterized by his true age, which was technically beyond Hashirama by a millennium. It was then that Hashirama and Mito began to discuss what would come next in their new child's education, and it was decided that he should attend the new school that Tobirama had created. Tobirama had always been a bit of a scholar, believing that there were too many secrets in the world to be discovered by any person during a single lifetime. It was true that Konoha would soon need a military force, and raising up children to be the next generation of shinobi was important. But Tobirama's own dream he had secretly pursued since the foundation of Konoha was to become a teacher. And this dream was finally fulfilled as he had become the schoolmaster of this new academy, essentially the principal of the establishment. Naruto, by this time, was learning just how malleable his flesh truly was, and was capable of changing his appearance into anything he desired. Despite this, Hashirama said that he should be true to who he was. This caused Naruto to not change much about his appearance, electing to merely take on a peachy skin color to match that of his parents. From there, they sent Naruto off to the academy, which wasn't too far from Hashirama's office. So Naruto would always know that if he ever needed his daddy, he was just a few doors down, likely chillin' and drinking some iced tea with Tobirama on the Hokage monument. Naruto's first day of class was like any child's, full of nervousness and worry. What if the other kids don't like me? Or what if the teachers are mean? Or what if I can't understand and fail? Or even, will I be okay without mama there? These were the thoughts every child might have on their first day of school, and Naruto was no exception. The look of sheer terror on his face drew attention. When it was time to be dropped off, Mito had a hard time pulling herself away because Naruto was too busy crying into her sleeve, begging her to stay with him. While this school was designed to turn children into shinobi, that didn't mean that the teachers didn't understand. Hashirama and Tobirama both had explained how they wanted this to go. They merely wished for the teachers to do their jobs and teach children everything to turn them into adults, as well as give them a basic grasp of ninjutsu. The things anybody could use. Whether the kids wanted to be ninja or not was up to them. The academy was merely there to provide the necessary tools. This was exactly how it should be, the founding brothers thought. After all, their original goal of creating this village was formed after the deaths of so many of their friends and brothers at a very young age. No child should ever be forced to fight and die on a battlefield. If such a war should happen, it ought to be the men, the adults who fight, not those who had yet to even experience life. And perhaps that's where Madara and Hashirama's own ideals had met. At some point, Hashirama believed that Madara had lost his way, but deep down, likely still believed in the concepts they had used to forge the village. Mito would kiss the boy's cheeks and wipe away his tears. "It's okay, Naruto. It's gonna be fun. You'll make so many new friends to play with, and the teachers are all really nice. I know many of them. And you won't be alone. Daddy's just down the hall." Naruto sniffled. "But I don't want you to leave, Mama." She pushed his hair back over his ears and wiped the tears from his cheeks. A part of her was relieved that he was crying. Tajirama hadn't cried a single tear when he went to school for the first time. He was pleased to be by himself. And while it hurt her to see Naruto so terrified, she was just glad to be needed. "I'll tell you what. How about I walk you inside, help you find a place to sit, and introduce you to your teacher? Does that sound good?" Naruto nodded. She hugged him to help him slow his sniffling. She then took out a hanky and wiped away his tears and let him blow his nose. She took his hand and began to walk with him into the building to the room where the children his age would gather to learn. Inside was a strong man with a tough build and large beard. Yet, for his intimidating stature, his face and eyes spoke of a kind heart that wanted to serve his community's young and lead them down the right path. Mito walked up. The man offered a slight bow. "Lady Mito, it's an honor to see you again." She smiled. "It's a pleasure indeed, Rao. I just came to drop off Naruto." The large and imposing man lowered to one knee to greet the small boy. "He's adorable. I didn't know that you and Lord Hashirama had produced a second child." Mito smiled. "Well, we hadn't planned anything, but this tiny fella found his way to our doorstep and we couldn't turn him away. We may not have decided to have any more kids, but it seemed God had another plan for us. Little blessings." The man looked to Naruto. He offered his hand. "Hello, Naruto. I'm Rao," he said in a tone that was light and inviting. "Would you like to be in my class? It'll be so much fun and you'll learn so many cool things. Why, I bet you'll surprise your parents with how smart you are when I teach you about the world. Will you join us?" Naruto was terrified by his beard, but intrigued all the same. He looked up at Mito, who smiled at him. Naruto walked forward cautiously and took Rao's hand. Rao smiled. "Wow, not only are you smart, but you're brave too. Come, I'll show you a place to sit. If you can keep a secret, it's the best place to sit. My favorite spot." He raised a finger to his mouth as if asking Naruto to keep a secret. He began to lead Naruto away. Mito watched as he went and felt that he would be okay. She would then go to Hashirama to spend a little time with him before heading home to get to work on her everyday duties. Rao led Naruto up to the steps where he was allowed to take a seat. He sat down and Rao helped him get what he would need from his backpack and set it on the desk. He would ruffle Naruto's hair. "If you need me for anything, I'll just be down the steps of my desk, okay?" Naruto nodded. He sat there and watched Rao return to his desk. Naruto sat there silently for a time and had yet to notice that there was a boy sitting next to him already. He looked over and saw the boy writing something out. It looked like letters? No, he was making a design out of it, and these letters didn't look like anything Naruto had ever seen. The boy finished what he was writing and looked at the paper and nodded. He then turned to Naruto and sat the paper in front of him and smiled. Naruto looked at it curiously, unable to understand it. The boy would suddenly touch the seals on the paper, and from the paper, a pop of confetti appeared. At first, this startled Naruto, and then it made him laugh. Naruto was astonished by this cool trick. "How did you do that?" he asked the boy. The boy shrugged. "It's just a simple summoning jutsu. My daddy taught me." Naruto looked at it and poked it again. The boy giggled awkwardly. "Sorry, it only works once." Naruto smiled. "Can I keep this?" he asked, looking at the paper. "I want to try it myself when I get home." The boy nodded. "It's yours. Consider it a welcoming gift." Naruto placed it in his bag. He then turned to face the boy. "Hi, I'm Naruto Senju." The boy smiled. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Naruto. My name is Hiruzen Sarutobi. And the sourpuss behind me with a scar on his chin is my rival, Danzo." "Don't call me a sourpuss," the other boy said. Naruto waved. Danzo looked over at him out of the corner of his eyes for a moment and then looked back at his paper. It seemed he was trying to do the same thing that Hiruzen was doing. He too was writing a formula on a piece of paper. Hiruzen looked over at him. Danzo, you might want to change this character here?" Danzo covered his paper with his whole torso. "Stop! I can do it too. I know what I'm doing." Naruto continued to watch. Hiruzen stood from his seat and slightly pulled Naruto's chair back a bit. Danzo would finish his own seal. He would tap his piece of paper and suddenly it would explode in his face. Danzo would sit there, his face covered in soot. Hiruzen would speak. I tried to tell you. You mixed up the kanji for confetti and explosion. You just made a paper bomb. Not something you give to the new kid. Danzo looked like he was about to throw a tantrum, but before he could, Rao was already standing in front of him, arms crossed and toe tapping. Danzo looked up at Rao for a moment before pointing away from himself. Hiruzen made me do it. Rao looked over at Hiruzen. All I did was give my friend a confetti tag. Rao squeezed his tear ducts. How many times do I have to tell you boys not to practice new jutsu in homeroom? We have a whole class for it. Hiruzen and Danzo both stood there and offered a slight bow. We're sorry, sensei, they both said in unison. Rao sighed. Given that it was an attempt to welcome our new friend, I won't pass down any punishments. But this is the last time, do you understand? Each boy bowed their head again. We understand, sensei. Rao turned and began to go back down the stairs to his desk. Hiruzen and Danzo sat back down. Hiruzen looked at Danzo out of the corner of his eye with a slight smile and elbowed him with a giggle. Danzo couldn't hide his own smirk no matter how much he wanted to. Hiruzen handed him a towel. Here you go. Danzo took it. Thanks. He began to rub the soot from his face. Naruto clapped. I thought the explosion was pretty cool, Danzo. Danzo's smirk turned into a grin. Thanks. Together, the boys enjoyed their classes. After a time, Naruto had completely forgotten that his mother wasn't there. He remembered it only when his mother came to pick him up from school. She took him home alongside Hashirama. So, who were those boys you were walking with, she asked. Oh, that was Hiruzen and Danzo. They're my new friends. Hashirama thought for a moment. Oh wait, you mean Sarutobi and Shimura? Naruto nodded. He knelt down to Naruto. You have good taste in friends. Their daddies are my friends too. They're on the council that helps me make the village safe. Mito giggled a little. That's not likely a coincidence. Rao likely set them up to be friends because of their connection to you. Hashirama nodded. Those boys have a bit of talent, Hiruzen especially. But Danzo's sheer need to surpass Hiruzen will likely spur them to go even further. I see them becoming strong shinobi, like their fathers. I can't tell you how many times my keister's been pulled out of the flames by the Sarutobi and Shimura clan's 10 braves. Maybe one day Naruto will want to be a shinobi too. And if he is, I bet he'll be the strongest shinobi ever. Mito looked to Naruto. Do you want to be a ninja, Naruto? Naruto nodded. I want to learn how to make paper bombs like Hiruzen and Danzo can. Hashirama laughed at this. I bet you'll learn that and more when you become a ninja. And together they went home where they would have dinner, clean up, and spend the rest of the day resting. Naruto sat by Mito and Hashirama. He was trying to replicate the same formula that Hiruzen and Danzo had used. Hashirama watched. You're doing that rather well, Naruto. Do you know what any of it means? A little. Hashirama smiled. Well, I bet I can teach you some cool new techniques to show your friends tomorrow. I have a book on it. Let me go get it right quick. Hashirama stood and walked off to the back room. Naruto continued to draw on it. He put the finishing touches on it. He looked up and smiled, certain that he copied the confetti bomb perfectly. He stood up and walked to the bedroom where Hashirama had gone. Dad, look what I did, he said as he opened the door, only to see Hashirama, his hand bleeding as it tried to catch the wire Kakuzu was trying to string behind his neck. Suddenly, the confetti bomb went off as Naruto stood there, his mouth agape. Hashirama looked to him. Naruto, run! He attempted to elbow Kakuzu in the ribs, which caused him to recoil slightly and tighten the wire. Naruto cried out, No! Stop hurting Daddy! Suddenly, from the boy's feet shot massive roots and vines, all going towards Kakuzu. The pressure in the room changed as Naruto's skin took on a pale color. Kakuzu was startled by this. This boy was stronger than the founding Hokage. Hashirama opened his eyes to look at Naruto and saw a set of Rinne Sharingan in his eye sockets, each one glowing like the blood moon. Hashirama managed to pull a kunai out and went to cut the wire. Naruto's wooden vines began to flail violently. Let go of Daddy, he screamed. Hashirama cut the wire and rolled away just as the wooden roots rushed in and stabbed through Kakuzu, pinning him to the wall. Kakuzu cried out and beat upon the wooden root, trying to free himself, but the finality of his wound had not yet set in. Slowly, his chakra, as well as his fluids, were sucked out, into the root, transferred to Naruto, who currently was forming small truth-seeking orbs around his head. Eventually, Kakuzu shrank to an empty sack of meat and bone, his blood and fluids completely absorbed by the vampiric wood that was holding him to the wall. Naruto blinked twice, and suddenly his demonic eyes faded back to normal. He fell to his knees. Hashirama rushed over and caught Naruto before he could pass out. I have you, Naruto, he shouted. I have you. At this time, Mito rushed in to check on the two and saw the sight. What happened? Hashirama held their unconscious son in his arms. Naruto saved me. And that is as good a place as any to pause it for the day. I hope you enjoyed it. I do plan for another part to release soon enough. What was your favorite part? And what do you want to see next? I really enjoyed this story. I've always toyed around with the idea that the Ten Tails could develop itself a personality. We've only ever seen it in a feral state, but we know that its individual parts are capable of critical thinking, abstract thought, and just general sentience. It's unique to consider that the Ten Tails is capable of this as well, and what kind of creature it could become if allowed to grow as a person rather than as a weapon. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the matter and where you think we should take this story. Until next time, peace out.
Did you enjoy our video? Well, then be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.